everyone, welcome back to the Library of Parthos. My name is Sarah, and today guys, it's another Ali Hazelwood book. So you know I'm going to have so many mixed emotions about this one today. But before we dive into that, something that has been so exciting for me, there is basically it's a Disney emo album that is coming out on September 6th, I want to say. And it's just all of these Disney song covers done by emo bands, and New Found Glory did Part of Your World, and that song just came out today, I think, and it is, I think, everything that I could have wanted in New Found Glory covering Part of Your World. Like, it was stellar. I was so excited. So I can't wait for the rest of the songs to come out. I mean, you know that I am absolutely an elder emo. And so I think Yellow Card, Plain White Tees, there are a couple other bands doing these covers, and I am so excited for this because I'm also a Disney adult, even though I will never admit to being a Disney adult. But it's all a mix of all of my favorite things together, and I can't wait for the full album. I will definitely be listening to that on repeat for a long time. Well, not for a long time, until I start, you know, cycling in those spooky season hits. But anyway, moving on. So today we are talking about another Ali Hazelwood book. As I said, this book is Not in Love. Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive into this one. Now, before I get into a spoiler-free summary and then the entire plot of this story, I do have to say, in the past, I have expressed that I have a love-hate relationship with Ali Hazelwood and that I consider myself a reluctant fan. And I have reviews of all of the stuff that she's written so far, so feel free to check out any of those. I will link those throughout the video as well as in the description box. So I read The Love Hypothesis first, loved it. Read Love on the Brain, didn't love it as much. And then I read her short story collection, which is called Loath to Love You, and I liked that even less. And then I read Love Theoretically, and I kind of figured out what was going on. So my biggest issue was that you could literally take the characters from any book and insert them into any other book, and it would be exactly the same. Like the type of female character, the type of male character, the way that the plot develops, same. And I was listening to a podcast where the host was talking about authors that follow a formula and how, you know, there are some authors who just they have a specific formula for how they write their books, and everyone follows that formula. And so that's for some people and it's not for other people. And I thought maybe it wasn't for me, but I think once I just accepted that all of her books were very formulaic, I found that I enjoyed them a lot more. I would say I'm not somebody who typically enjoys very formulaic books. If I'm reading a series or just several books by the same author and I start to notice that it's just following the same pattern, I lose interest very quickly. And I think I was falling into that with Ali Hazelwood until I realized that there were elements of her writing that I really do like. I like that she takes the feminist perspective with her main characters. I do like how she writes the romance in particular. I'm a big fan of that. And so I just accepted that she was following this pattern for all of her books, and that's the way it was going to be. And if I wanted to continue reading them, I needed to just accept that that was what I was going to find, and I think it helped. And then, of course, she writes Bride, which is an entirely different book. It is let's call it a fantasy romance with a vampire and a werewolf. So very different from her other books. There were still some elements that kind of followed that formula, but she did deviate from it quite a bit. And now we have this one. So this one, I would also argue, is quite different than her other books. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into Not in Love. We'll do a spoiler-free summary first, just a very quick overview of the plot, and then I'll get into the spoilers and my thoughts on the book. This is the story of Rue Seibert and Eli Kilgore. Rue and Eli meet on a dating app, and then when they eventually meet in real life, they discover that they have quite a bit in common, especially as far as careers are concerned, and more so, they discover that there is quite a bit of conflict between their respective careers. So that leads to a bit of a challenge where they are feeling guilt on their parts for being together, secrecy, lying, all of those things, as they continue working through their personal problems, their relationship problems, if you can call it that, and also their career issues and their conflicts. So that's pretty much it. That was, I don't think I could be more vague than that. So hopefully that was vague enough to not spoil anything in the story. But now let's go ahead and get into the spoilers so we can talk about all the juicy details in this book. If you are wanting to read the book and don't want it to be ruined, or you're just somebody who does not like spoilers, period, feel free to skip to the end of the video. I think what I want to do to talk about this book is I want to just establish these characters first. And this is going to reveal a lot of the plot that happens throughout the entire story, but I think it's just going to be easier to talk about if we know who we're talking about from the beginning. So Rue Seibert, the female STEMinist main character, comes from a very challenging and difficult childhood. Her father really wasn't around. Her mother was not always in a position to be able to provide for the family. So a lot of times there wasn't enough food. Rue was the one taking care of her younger brother, making sure that he was safe and cared for and fed. That led to a lot of trauma throughout her life. She specifically mentions not being able to eat while standing, not being able to eat when rushed or within a time constraint, because of all of these time periods where she didn't have food and would have to kind of ration or steal or lie or rely on other people to provide food for her because her mom was not a reliable source of care at that time. Eli Kilgore, our main love interest, grew up with a fairly supportive family. However, both of his parents died when he was in just out of college, I think. So like early 20s, mid 20s. And at that point, he gained custody of his younger sister, Maya, who was a teenager at the time, preteen teenager. So he went from being a recent college graduate to having to provide and care for a young girl. He did not have much of a relationship with her as well because there was such an age difference. I think it's about 18 years if I'm not mistaken. So that was very difficult. And also, this is going to ruin a little bit of the plot, but I think it needs to be said while we're establishing these characters that he had worked on this technology in college that could have been very successful, and that was taken away from him. So he essentially lost a source of income and also gained a dependent that he had to care for. So those are our two characters. And I set that all up because at the beginning of the story, we're introduced to them and we find out that Rue, specifically, because I believe we see her perspective first. It is a dual point of view story. She is looking to hook up with somebody. She does not do repeats. She is not interested in a relationship, and that's namely because she doesn't feel like she can handle it. From an emotional perspective, she still has a lot of healing to do herself and doesn't feel like she can commit to a relationship with all of her baggage, essentially. So she and Eli connect on an app. They plan to meet at a hotel bar, and when Eli shows up, Rue is being confronted by another man. He kind of watches it for a minute to see if maybe it's like a jealous boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend or something along those lines, but it quickly escalates to a situation that makes him feel a little uncomfortable just watching it happen. And so he does step in, and it's actually her brother, her younger brother, Vince, who is arguing over a piece of property that was left to both of them by their father. He wants to sell the property, she wants to keep it, so they're at odds, and he is confronting her, and just, it's getting a bit much. He's like standing outside the bar waiting for her to leave. Like it's to the point that it's concerning. So Eli steps in, he makes sure that Vince, her brother, leaves and is not going to bother her anymore. And of course, at this point, Rue says, you know, that kind of ruined the evening for me. Like, I'm not really interested in anything after that. But Eli does say, you know, I don't feel comfortable leaving you to get home on your own, to call an Uber. I just don't know if he's going to be waiting for you. I don't know what else he's going to do. Like, he's a little unhinged. I'm not sure how this is going to go. Let me please just take you home and make sure that you get home safely. So Rue agrees to that, and she has a very strict set of rules that she follows. There are no repeats. She does not bring anybody back to her apartment. So this is kind of, you know, breaking a rule, but it's breaking a rule for a good reason, to make sure that she's safe. So she goes along with it. And before they leave, they exchange numbers, and you can tell that, I mean, I think Eli says he wants to see her again, and you can tell that Rue is interested, but she's still kind of trying to stick to those rules that she has established for herself. Now we get to see a little bit into Rue and Eli's career. Rue is a chemical engineer of sorts, and she is working on a food coating that should make produce last longer so that more people can have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. She works at a company called Klein, and Klein is owned by one of her close friends, Florence Klein, who was this big like prodigy in her time at the University of Texas, came up with this biofuel technology. She did it all without the university funding or providing the resources. So she's kind of praised for that, and then created this company. She kind of took a chance on Rue and her friend Tisha. I mean, they were undergrads when they met. Florence was a grad student or a teacher, I'm not sure at that point. But, you know, they had just graduated with their PhD. They didn't have a lot of experience, so she brought them both on at the company and also allowed them to do their own work, not under the company banner, so that if it was patented, they would get credit for that work. So Rue is working on this food coating on her own, and if she gets the patent for it when it's completed, then that will belong to her. Rue and Tisha, in meeting with Florence, find out that Klein has been purchased by Harkness, which is kind of this big, I don't even know how to describe it, but they just like acquire companies. And so the loan on Klein is up. Florence isn't able to pay it as of now without some investors, and it has been purchased by Harkness. So there are 4 people from Harkness who come to Klein to speak to the employees as a whole and say, you know, we're not firing anyone, we're not laying anyone off, we're not eliminating jobs, we're not cutting pay, like, we're just here to help. And those 4 people, of course, one of them is Eli. So Rue is, of course, shocked to discover that the person that she is considering breaking all of her rules for is ruining her best friend's life. And so from this point on, we have a lot of conflict between Rue and Eli, who are struggling to deny their attraction to each other, and they're failing at it, quite frankly. They can't stay away from each other. But also, Rue in particular feels very guilty because she feels like she's betraying her friend. She feels like she's somehow, like, you know, sleeping with the enemy, essentially. And she's also lying to Florence about her association with Eli. She multiple times denies any sort of connection between them. She knows, Florence is aware that they went on like one date together, but she thinks that everything has been ended since then, and that is of course not the case. So as Eli and Rue become closer, they kind of do this thing where they each tell each other a terrible story from their past, and so they start to open up to each other a little bit more. And throughout the course of the book, they become more comfortable with each other. So Rue really feels accepted. She feels like she doesn't have to change or, you know, be something that she's not around Eli. And he also feels very seen and accepted and just obsessed with her. As they're getting to know each other a little bit more, and as Rue is kind of investigating what is going on with Florence Klein and the company, we get the full backstory. So when Florence was working at the University of Texas, she had 3 students that she took on as mentors, and they are the 3 owners of Harkness currently. And while they were working with her as a mentor, they created the biofuel technology that she currently owns. So they had created it, figured everything out, everything was working very well. They were going to get a patent for it. They went home for like break or went on vacation or something, and when they came back, Florence was not answering their emails. She took credit for the biofuel tech, used that to start her company, and essentially they just want it back. They want what they created back. They're not out to ruin the company or anything like that. They just want the patent for their technology. Rue is very hurt by this because she had asked Florence specifically if she knew any of these people from Harkness, like Eli, and Florence said she had no idea, she'd never met them, and that was not at all the case. She'd known them for like 10 plus years. So Rue feels very betrayed, and in her investigation and kind of deciding what is the right thing to do, should I protect my job? Should I protect my friend? Should I trust that Eli is telling me the truth and is looking out for my best interests? She's kind of at a crossroads, and it comes to light that her patent that was supposed to belong to her, that contract that Florence created, was never actually official. Like, it was not taken to the board, which would have then made it legal. So Rue's patent essentially could be sold at any point, and Florence is fully intending to sell that patent to try to keep her company under her own control. So at that point, Rue's like, I'm done with her. You know, she not only lied about somebody that I care very deeply about, but she lied to me, and that is totally unacceptable. Like, she literally did the same thing, stealing somebody's patent twice. So no thank you, not interested in that relationship anymore. Eli finds out about this as well, and now he is at a crossroads because the plan was basically to just take over Klein and kick Florence out. But now he knows that if he does that, Rue's gonna lose her patent, which is essentially what happened to them. So they are able to come up with a compromise. Basically, the patents are under their control. Rue's patent belongs to her. They hold 4 board positions, I believe, and have 35% of the shares. Florence is given a whopping 5%, but she is able to stay on as CEO. So at the end of the book, you know, Eli tells Rue that he is in love with her, that he wants more. She doesn't answer right away. She takes a little bit to kind of figure out what specifically she's feeling, and she does admit to being in love with him and open to trying a relationship of sorts. And so that's what happens at the end of the story, and then in the epilogue they get engaged and everyone has their happily ever after, except for Florence, of course, because she is the villain in the story. So to wrap it up, couple of thoughts about the book. First of all, it is a dual point of view story, which I don't mind. A lot of times I enjoy those because I think we get a much deeper look into the characters' thoughts and feelings, and I think that that's really insightful at times. I wasn't a huge fan of the dual point of view in this book because Rue was speaking in first person, and then there was like a narrator for Eli. It was like, you know, I woke up and I checked my phone, Tisha had texted me, blah, blah, blah. And then Eli's chapters were like, he knew he shouldn't have looked at his phone. And so I just was not a fan of that. I think I prefer dual point of view to be like first person, not first person, third person. So I wasn't a fan of that. And it really threw me off when switching chapters, especially like I was really powering through this book because I was enjoying it so much. And I'd just glance at who was speaking in each of the chapters. And if I didn't like look at it and like really think about it, it took me a long time to kind of like situate myself with which character was speaking and whose chapter we were reading. So I really liked how we got a really in-depth look into how trauma has impacted these characters, not only how it impacts their lives, but also their relationships with other people. I think that is so true, and that's something that happens all the time, and I think it's often overlooked, especially in fantasy. I think there are a lot of times where characters, let's take Feyre, for example, go through horrible things and are treated terribly by so many people, and then they're just like, fine. Now, I will say she does have some like PTSD symptoms from trauma that I appreciate the author throwing in there. But for the most part, like she suffered a whole lot and is just like okay with it. So I think it was nice to see a realistic portrayal of characters dealing with trauma, and especially how it impacts their relationships with other people. Because really, like, that's not... from like Rue's perspective, like being in a relationship was not going to heal her. She needed to work through some things on her own and kind of figure out what she could handle and what she couldn't. The other thing that I have been thinking about quite a bit is like Florence's, let's call it punishment, to be kept on as CEO but only have 5% of the shares and have 4 of the board members from the company that has like purchased your company. I honestly think it's worse than her just being kicked out as CEO. Because, like, if that had happened, she could have just gone and become CEO somewhere else or some other, like, high-paying position somewhere else. So I feel like this is a much crueler punishment to be kept on and basically to be told what to do, to have very little sway with the board, and to be getting so little of the shares. I don't know. I think it's a much worse punishment, and one that probably fits the crime with what she did to these people. So as I said at the beginning, this does not really follow the formula that most of Ali Hazelwood's books follow. I think usually there's like something that's not making sense, and then there's like the big like, it was me the whole time at the end of the book. And in this one, the seeds of doubt were planted really early. Like, because there was no way that Eli, with the way that he treated Rue, and he was very considerate and thoughtful of other people, like, there's no way that he could have been somebody who was just purchasing a company just to purchase a company. Like, it was not making sense from the beginning. And then there were things that were just sketchy the whole way through. So I think that was another difference, is it was kind of slowly being revealed to us what was going on and who was actually at fault in this situation. So that was a nice change, and I enjoyed that. Oddly enough, I didn't think I'd have much to say about this book, but here I am a really long time later. Anyway, so that's the end of Not in Love. Definitely recommend it, especially if you are an Ali Hazelwood fan or a reluctant fan like me. It's worth checking out. It's a quick read. I powered through it really quickly because I could not put it down. So yeah, check it out. So that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye. So this is the story of Rue Seibert and Eli, I forgot his name.